What's up, everybody? It's your boy Swomp, about to get into this comprehensive guide to Of the Trees. There's a whole lot of information to go over. I'm going to go over every sound that I made or used in this project file, so I hope you're ready to get into it. We're going to start with these vocal chops that I used in the intro. I really like the energy that it builds. I used a 21 Savage vocal acapella to do this. It consists of two different parts. There's one like grainy textured vocal part, and then another one that's a little bit cleaner and more rhythmic. So this is the grainy one. The vocal is stretched out to 999 beats per minute, and it's on the complex mode. That gives it this like weird grainy texture type sound. And then I pitched it down -6 semitones. So this is what that sounds like. Cool. And then the more rhythmic vocal chop, the BPM is the same as the original, and then it is also pitched down -6, but I just found little vowel samples. One of them is more of an E or an ah sound, the other one is more of an O sound, and then switching between the two with this like rhythmic percussion type vibe gives it like a lot of energy that you can really fill in the intro. So this is what that sounds like. Okay, and then the two of them together sound like this. Cool. And then the processing on both of them is literally just an EQ. I have this auto pan come on later in the track, but we'll get to that when we get to that. And then again on here, I had some reverb on here, but I liked it more dry and crisp, so I turned that off. And then I just have a EQ opening up on the high end as it comes in the intro, as you can see here. It's low pass, starts coming in with the high end. There we go. Also in this intro, I have some chimes. And I have a reverse crash to sweep into where the drums come in. I have a bunch of reverb on this using a send. This is what the reverb looks like. It's got like a pretty long decay time of like 6.5 seconds, cutting out the low end and then dropping a EQ on there to make sure there is no low end at all coming out of it. Then we have, after that, we've got some brass. It's just like a cashmere brass stab sample, pulling down on the high end a little bit. Sick. Last but not least, in this intro, we have the lead sound. This is the melody that we're playing. It's kind of like the Egyptian Arabic style scale where you're using the root note and then the second is a flat. So you're able to bounce between the root note and one semitone up. And that really gives it like this mysterious, ominous feel. Also, you're focusing around half-step relationships between the notes. As you can see here, like every note that I'm using, the counterpart is a half step away for the most part, except for this C sharp down here. That's the melody, and let's get into the sound. Pretty basic sound. We've got the Juno oscillator here. It's on the second wavetable position. Two voices of unison. Detune is all the way down. Random is about 47%. And then we have a couple macros going on. So this macro opens up the filter, and this macro closes the sustain on envelope 1. So as you open it up, it lowers the sustain. In the effects tab, there's nothing going on. I have all my effects in the channel strip down here, so we'll go over that right now. There's a little bit of delay. It's on the 3, which is basically repeating the delay every 3/8 notes. We've got the filter. It's focused around 2.1K. And then this EQ is bringing in the high end over time. And it gets automated all the way up in this part of the song. But for the intro, it's basically just keeping it nice and tame with mainly the mids. right, so let's get into these drums now. These drums are like kind of a drill type pattern. I've been hearing this a lot lately, where you have kind of a 3/8 note hi-hat pattern with little bits of fills in between. It gives it like this really cool bounce and groove to it. Cool. So there's that. The second layer of hi-hats that I have on there adds a lot more like variation in velocity and like patterns as well. You can hear there's like kind of a shaker going on in this loop, tambourine type thing. And then we have basically what you would do with like a house pattern. Just helps add to the bounce. For the kick, it's a kind of a dull but thumpy kick. I was using this one before, but it was a little bit too clicky for me. Oh, I low passed it because I was trying to get it to be a little bit softer, but this was it originally. It sounded really nice with the rest of the drums, but once I started adding in sounds on top of that, it was like clicking a little bit too much. So that's when I threw in this other kick. Before, drums sounded like this. And now they sound like this. The snare is just a super, super simple rim snare, rim shot. It sounds nice. I use this snare a lot. If you've listened to the Womps from the Swamp Volume 2, it was in like at least 5 or 6 of the songs. And then I'm layering that with a little bit of Foley. With the snare. Last but not least, we have this little wub sound. I have a bunch of reverb on there with the send and then some delay and multi-band compression. Right now I have the lows cut out, but later on I have the lows come back in. I turn off this EQ and I turn off this delay when I use the sound in the drop section. And then that's why this multi-band dynamics is on here, because the low end was a little bit too fat. It was overpowering. So I just cut that out. All right, that is this section. Yeah. All right. Here we are getting into this little breakdown before the drop. I bring in some flutes, some reverbed out wubs, and some effects to help with all the transitions. Let's get into it. The flute that I found, this is actually a combination of 2 samples that I consolidated together. This first one is just some random splice sample. The second one was, I want to say, from a Cashmere pack, but I cannot remember for sure. That's what this is what that sounds like. Cool. So on here, I am just using the right side of the sample to make it mono, because as you can see, like this is clearly heavy on the right side. So I just used that part of the sample. If I were to resample this into audio, it would be mono. You would only have the right channel showing up as a singular waveform through the center. And then I am just cutting out the low end, and I put a ton of reverb on it with the send. Cool. Next thing we'll go over here is this wub. This is a Serum patch. It's pretty simple, just basic FM synthesis. Oscillator 1 is just a sine wave, 1 voice of unison, random turned all the way down. And LFO 1 is modulating FM from B. The knob is at 24%, and the modulation is going up 16. And then the LFO is modulating the level of the oscillator. Oscillator B is up to 2 octaves. It's got 2 voices of unison, and the detune is turned like almost all the way down. And sync is set to 3.02. I had to tweak this number to get it to sound right because you're basically tuning the oscillator. I can show you with a macro. So as you turn this up more, it gets higher in pitch. As you turn it down, it lowers in pitch. It's not technically the pitch, but it's like the tone. So I was able to find a sweet spot with that. And this is what it sounds like again. The LFO is set to 1/8 notes on the triplets, and it's set to trigger. I also have it on mono and legato. There is a glide time of 146 milliseconds. This macro is going to oscillator, the octave of oscillator 2, so that I can easily change it with the turn of a knob, because I didn't want to have to go in and automate the actual oscillator octave level. And then this one is opening up the LFO a little bit more. If you didn't know, you can drop a macro onto these breakpoints. And then from there, you can use a macro to adjust how much you want the oscillator or the LFO to open or close to change the shape of it. In the effects, we've got some distortion going on. We've got a filter, and we've got some reverb. So the LFO is opening up the cutoff. It's on MG low 6. It's opening up the cutoff from the 0 all the way up to 62. There's no resonance, no drive. Everything else is completely stock. We're just cleaning up the sound because after we turn on the distortion, it gets a little bit too dirty. After that, we've got this reverb. The LFO is closing the reverb. So as the sound opens, the reverb turns off. Okay, and that is it for this sound. Actually, for that patch, but then we have some post-processing here. I've got a saturator turning it up 5.71 dB on analog clip. Got some erosion, wide noise. The frequency is 11.1, width is at 0.30, amount is at 77.4. We have some more reverb on here. This is a third-party reverb called ROM. I got it for free. I don't know if it's still available for free, but you should go check and see if they have it. It's a pretty nice reverb. The low cut here is turned up to minus 8.3. That's just cutting out some of the lows, which I then do again with the EQ over here. Mix is set to 44% dry, or the decay is set to 4.8 seconds, which is a pretty big reverb. When the sound comes in, I'm barely giving you any of it. And then as the breakdown or as the break buildup progresses, I open up the sound over time, giving you a little bit more of the tonality, more of the harmonics. This is the clipper. It's a free clipper by Ven Audio. If you don't have it, go grab it. I use this on like all my tracks. It helps a lot with drums, basically giving you more headroom by cutting off the peaks that you don't really need. Next, we have this sine wave pad. It's a pretty simple patch. It's literally just sine wave, 1 voice of unison, random all the way down. No effects. The LFO is modulating the coarse pitch of oscillator 1, and it's basically just adding a little bit of vibrato and movement to it. Again, no processing. Got some reverb with ROM. A while ago, I saved this patch as an audio rack so that I can just drop it in and use it whenever. So that's why it has the reverb on there. It sounded good, so I just left it on, but normally I would just use the send for the reverb. After that, we have an EQ cutting out the lows, and auto pan and erosion are turned off. I'm not using them. This thing here is an audio effect rack that I created called Reduxify. As you turn up macro 1, it basically adds a little bit of some phaser, flanger, and redux. It also cuts out the lows. And then there's a couple erosions on here. One of them is just on sine mode with this amount gets turned up as you increase the macro 1. And then we have just a regular wide noise erosion over here as well. Without this Reduxify patch or audio effect track, it just sounds like this. Cool. And then this is the chord progression we're using. We've got a D sharp minor, E major, and a C sharp minor. Those together create this like super mysterious, ominous feel. I love this chord progression. I've used it in a couple tracks actually. We already went over the brass, so next thing we have to go over is this effects group. We've got an impact. It's very simple, cashmere impact. We've got those chimes. We've got sweeps. The sweep is sweeping down, and then I duplicated and reversed it, and it sweeps back up into the drop. And last but not least, we have some laser sounds. Cool. Let's play all that together. Now we are in the drop. So this drum groove is a bit different than the one that I showed you in the intro. This one is more focused around triplet drum grooves or triplet drum fills. This is what that sounds like. We already went over the kick, but like I said, there are triplet grooves in here. So this offbeat is on a triplet. This one is not. See, that's just on the regular quarter notes. This one is quarter notes triplets. Drum fills, drum fills, drum fills. Of the Trees is the king of triplet drum fills. I swear, this man does it better than anybody else. All the percussion that he uses is like super, super clean and crisp, really tight percussion. Some laser sounds. If you don't know how to make one of these, it's literally just a Serum patch, but you can do it with any synth. You can take any one of your basic shapes and you want to create a pitch envelope. The pitch envelope is going to go to the master tune. So we'll take envelope 1, go into the master tune, global master tune, and then just crank that up. You can go up like 2 octaves, 4 octaves. I think that's like the sweet spot right there. And then if you want it to be a longer pitch down, you just increase the decay time. If you want it to be shorter, just decrease the decay time. Some more of the percussion sounds that we have going on here. I have this percussion hit from Ataya, and it's kind of rolling in. We've got some more Foley here. This one is apparently a cup. Again, we have the percussion kind of rolling in here, that Ataya sample. And then up here, we've got this like wooden stick type hit. All together, this is what we've got. Oh, and the hi-hat. So it's just a pretty simple hi-hat, but every quarter note, I have it switching between the original, and then this one is pitched down 1 semitone and turned down 1.5 decibels, and it kind of gives it variation between 2 different hats as opposed to just the same one hitting every single quarter note. Gives it some groove that you wouldn't have otherwise. There's like something to be said about that. You don't necessarily have to add like crazy swing to add a groove. You can literally just like change the sample that you're using, pitch it down, turn it down, and you can create grooves with that. So keep that in mind. Next, we're going back to this wub that we talked about earlier. It's the same one that we used in the build up, but I automated some things I automated the wavetable position and that macro. So it goes up. It changes the wavetable position from a sine wave to a saw wave. It gives it a little bit more grit and texture. It's not as clean anymore. This is with the sine wave. And this is with the saw wave. The sub is literally just two sine waves. One of them is FMing the other. So here we've got oscillator one. It's a basic shapes, and I kind of added a couple of harmonics on here. And then random is all the way down. FM from B is at 30%. We're not modulating it at all. It's just static. And then we have oscillator B is up one octave, levels all the way down, randoms all the way down, one voice of unison. Because it's a sub, you want it to be mono. We're cutting it off at 200 hertz. Drive is at 52%, mix is 100%. We've got these compression settings. Multiband is turned off. You can copy all these here. I think I just turned down the threshold and turned up the gain. And then we've got one more filter here. It's on MG low 18, cutting off everything above 140. I believe everything else on here is stock. And then for post-processing, it's literally just EQ, cutting off everything above 150 or so. I've noticed that the FM, with a pretty low ratio between octaves on the oscillators, sounds really nice for a sub. It adds the nice grit that you get from like 808s usually. This is it with the FM. And then this is if I turn off the FM. You hear how much like warmth comes into the sound when you turn on the FM. It's a great technique. I highly recommend it. Okay. Then we've got some bass fills going on here. This is the first growl sound that we're using. It's a Vital patch. If you're not using Vital, get on it. It's a free VST. Highly recommend. Oscillator one is a basic shapes. It's down 2 octaves. The level is at 0.5. Also, it's at one voice of unison. The phase turned down all the way. Oscillator B is at -5 semitones. The level is turned down all the way, but then we are automating that, and it's on harmonic series, and the frame is at 1.33. Distortion turned on, and it's on soft clip mode. It's at 22.2 decibels. Mixes all the way up. This LFO is modulating the level of oscillator 2. We're not automating it. For the post-processing, we've got this EQ cutting out some of the low mids, boosting a little bit of the higher mids. We've got a auto filter that is being automated. We're opening up the cutoff. This is temper. I believe this was a free distortion VST. If you don't have it, go grab it. Drive is set to 4.4. Curve is at 1, saturation is at 1. I believe everything else is stock. I just increased the drive on here. And then we are automating the reverb. It comes in and it's at the max at this very last little part. Next, we've got a couple little bass samples. This one is from Tynan, from one of his splice packs. Next one is from an FN pack. This is basically just another FM sound. I'll show you how to make something similar a little bit later in the track. Count on FM with like a saw wave being involved, a saw, and I believe a sine. I don't know if we went over these vocals, but on this skirt, we've got some delay. And then on this, yep, it's just dry.
Yeah.
Okay, this next section is one of my favorite parts of the track.
Yeah.
Okay, so we've got that lead coming back in here, and then we've got the sub. It's just hitting a straight D sharp. Okay, so let's check out the wubs. This is a Vital patch, pretty simple one, doing a very similar process to what we've done before with the FM from B. This first oscillator is a sine wave. It's down 2 octaves. It's on basic shapes, and the LFO is modulating the level and the FM amount. Oscillator 2 is Clicky Robot. It's down or it's up 2 octaves. It's got 2 voices of unison. Phase is at 100%. Forgot to mention, but the phase is at 0 on oscillator A, oscillator 1. LFO2 is modulating the waveform positions. It's set to trigger mode on a half bar, and then it's got this square. So as it plays through the sound, it changes the wavetable position every quarter note. So it's set to a half bar, and then it's playing a different position on the wavetable position every quarter note because this half bar is divided in half again. So that would be a quarter bar, aka a quarter note. For post-processing, we literally just have the distortion on. LFO1 is increasing the drive amount. It's also opening up the filter. I forgot to mention that. We've got this filter turned on here. Resonance is at 50%. The cutoff is at minus 27, minus 28. And then it's opening up all the way with LFO1. For post-processing, I have an EQ, which I am going to cut the highs out on this second half for variation. And then I have another EQ here, basically cutting out some of these like higher end frequencies. It got a little bit sharp and harsh right here, so I cut those down. And then I have an erosion, which I'm switching from wide noise to sine mode. It's on the wide noise mode on the first half. And then on the second half, when I want the variation to come in, I cut out the high end over here on the EQ, and then I switched it from wide noise to sine mode. And this is what it sounds like there. So it's like much more tame. And then we just have a utility turning it off on the first hit right here. This is the first quarter note because I have this brass stab that hits there, and I didn't want the bass interfering with that. So it just continues to do that on the first hit, every first quarter note. And then we have that free clip here again. With the free clip, we're basically just adding more headroom by pulling down on the peaks. Here's that in context.
Yeah.
For this next section, we just go back into the break. It's the same break that we had here. This part, this is my favorite part of the track. I feel like I nailed this. This is like heavily inspired by Of the Trees remix of Hieroglyphics by Subtronix.
Yeah.
Here we have this new sound come in here. This I called the OTT saw sign, which is the Of the Trees saw sign. We've got a saw wave. It's turned down 2 octaves, 1 voice of unison, random all the way down. And we've got FM going on. So this FM is pulling in some harmonics from the second oscillator. However, this oscillator is turned down all the way, so you're not really hearing it other than what you're getting from the FM. We are using the FM to create kind of a screech sound. So when we do that, you get more of the harmonics being pulled through, and we're distorting the crap out of those together, which creates this nice screech sound. So here you go. That's what that sounds like. And then we have some distortion going on. Keep it simple. This macro is what I'm using to automate the frequency modulation, the FM from B. That is being modulated by a macro down here. So to do that, you just open it up, you hit configure, click on whatever you want to map to a macro. It will pop up here, turn configure off. right click on there and then just map it to whatever macro you want to map it to. That way you don't have to like go into Serum, mess with the macros or mess with the actual automation on your FM because you don't want to necessarily mess that up. So for the second instance of Serum, we've got oscillator A is a sine wave, oscillator B is a sine wave, and the sub is also a sine wave. Oscillator A is down 2 octaves. It's got the random turn down and it's got FM from B. Oscillator B, I didn't change the octaves. The semitones are up +7. It's got 2 voices unison. Detune is turned down almost all the way. Level is turned down to 42% on this one, and it's at 68% on oscillator A. This macro increases the amount of the level on oscillator 2. So if you want to have that sine wave poke through a little bit more, I just turn this macro up. The sub is at +1 octave, and that gives it like the top end sine wave. I felt like it was missing a little something, and as soon as I turned this on, the sound was full. It is exactly what I was looking for. This is without, and this is with. I've got some more macros going on here. First of all, this macro is being routed to this macro, and then this macro is being routed to the sine +7. And then I also have a macro for the volume of the sine wave in case I wanted to turn it off. I can do that pretty easily just by automating this. Last but not least, there is a macro turning on or off this EQ. If I want it on, I can just automate this to turn on. If I want it off, I can just automate this to turn off. Next, we've got the free clip on here again, just pulling out some of those like buzzy top end stuff from the saw wave. And then we have the chorus turn on a vibrato, 6.18 hertz for the frequency or for the rate. And then the amount I'm just automating on right here at the very end to give it like a little bit of the vibrato wiggle. After that, we've just got some more EQs going on, cutting out any low end that might be popping through because I am using a dedicated sub for this. It's the same sub that we talked about earlier, so you don't have to worry about that. All together, it sounds like this once again. So yeah, you can hear that FM really screech through. This is kind of what I was talking about with the FN sound. Obviously, that one is like way more distorted, but you can get a very similar tone by just doing the FM as I showed you right here. So yeah, that's all. It's kind of crazy, but all of this is literally coming from one MIDI clip. This next section here, I bring in some brass and I take the flutes out for the majority of this section. I just have them come in for like the turnarounds. For this brass, I have a couple different layers. One of them is the Labs BBC Symphony. I'm using the bass trombones. I'm adding some saturation. I left the drive as it was at 0, and then I just turned on the medium curve, and that adds like a lot of grit to brass type sounds. I do this quite frequently, actually. If I ever find a brass sound that sounds good, but it's not quite dirty enough, just add a saturator. Don't mess with the drive at all. Change the algorithm from analog clip to like either soft sine or medium curve, and it really like brings out the brassiness of everything. This is without, and this is with. And then to blend it with the other sounds, since saw waves, which I'm using in that patch I just showed you, are very brassy, I wanted to kind of take those frequencies out of the sound and accent the ones that only the frequencies that I needed. So I'm basically cutting everything below 375, dipping down this whole midsection quite a bit, and then boosting the high end. Without sounds like this. With sounds like this. I have a utility here. It's increasing the width, so it's a little bit more stereo. And then I'm just automating the volume down over here so that it kind of fades out. Last but not least, I have reverb automating up for the very ends to help with that fade out. And this whole channel is panned 16 to the left to kind of even it out a little bit because it was a little heavy on the right side. The next layer of brass that we have here is more brass stabs. These are from an excellent pack, XLNT Sound. If you haven't heard of them, they make like excellent tutorials, no pun intended. Um, some of the best sound design in the game. Honestly, their stuff is extremely thorough. So I highly recommend checking out their stuff, checking out their packs. They've got some really high quality stuff there. Everything else seems to be the same. I did bring in the triplet hi-hat groove. I forgot to mention that earlier. This is just, I've searched for triplet hi-hats. I could have done this myself, but you know, loops are quicker, so might as well, right? Um, and I did have to kind of mess with this. The original sample, oh, I consolidated it actually. The original sample was kind of like offbeat. It started like over here, so I had to adjust the timing of everything and get the triplets to sound a little bit nicer. And then I'm just high passing the crap out of it so that I'm only getting like the high end. Before it sounded like this, and now it sounds like this. Way cleaner, way cleaner. That's it for this section. Let's play this whole thing all together. Oh, I forgot there's owl sound in here. You know, Of the Trees Loves Owls. The owl song is a banger. Might as well throw some owl sounds in here. I'm cutting out the high end and the low end. It's basically a bandpass filter, cutting out everything above 2K and everything below 500 hertz. And then we have a delay here. I just put it onto quarter notes. Feedback's at 38% and dry wet is stock. It's not on ping pong mode. It's just on the repitch mode. All right, this next section.
Yeah.
So for this section, I brought the vocal chop back in, but instead of it being a like 16th note pattern, I changed it to fit the triplet groove. Otherwise, it would have been like conflicting with the drums. And then on this grainy vocal part, I brought the auto pan in. I mentioned that I would do this earlier, and this is what it's doing. I just set it to 12th notes, which is basically creating a triplet groove. And then I have it on the triangle mode. The shape is turned all the way up to turn it into more of a gate. And then I have the amount turned up to 65%. Offset is at 111 because if I didn't have that, it would be the gate wouldn't start in time. So I increased this until it was lined up with the beginning. And that sounds like this. We brought in an 808 here. I don't know if I mentioned this 808 in the beginning. I don't believe I did. It's just a sample, a nice, it says Res 808, but it's not from like Res. It's just a random sample from Splice. It's in the sampler. I've got it pitched up so that it's hitting the right note. It's on glide. The glide time is set to 50 milliseconds. I have the filter set from the clean to OSR mode. And when you do that, it gives you a drive option so you can add saturation within the filter in the sampler. After that, we've just got the saturator. Once again, just changing the algorithm from analog clip. This one is on soft sine, and I have the soft clip on as well. This is what the 808 sounds like. Like I said, triplet fills are like a key factor in Of the Trees type music. So these 808 fills are all hitting in the triplet groove. So you've got the triplet mode turned on here. Cool. In context, I'll show you in context the 808 with the drums. This melody comes back in, the lead sound that we were using earlier, but I actually changed the melody to fit better with this chord progression in this section of the track. It also helps with like telling a story and creating a journey for the song to progress through. Instead of being just the same melody throughout the entire song, you get a little bit of variation here. This is what that sounds like. This one gives me like, I don't know, Zelda or like Pokemon type vibes. Then we have this patch here. This is the chords that we're using. I'll play it for you. We've got two of the Juno wavetables. They're both set to the second wavetable position. Both of them have two voices of unison. The random on the first one is turned down to 47%. On the second, it is at 100. The level of oscillator A is at 75%, and the level of oscillator B is at 54%. The LFO1 is opening up the cutoff, and that is set to trigger mode, and it's on triplet quarter notes. Then we've got this macro. Over time, it is opening up the cutoff, and it's also modulating this breakpoint on the LFO. As I increase it, it changes the shape. As this sound is opening up with a filter, it's also opening up the LFO so that you get a little bit more of the sound, a little bit more of the frequencies coming through. There's no effects going on within Serum, but I have some going on in the post-processing. So let's check that out. There's a little bit of delay. Dry wet is at 17%, so it's super quiet. The feedback is at 26. And then I've got the filter focused around 2.1K. I've got an EQ here. It's cutting out everything below 186 hertz, dipping down some of the mid-range and then boosting up a little bit here. And then we've just got the spectral resonator at the end. So this spectral resonator, we have it set to the MIDI mode. It's taking the MIDI from the chords and then resonating based on that. So I have it routed here. See, I've got the decay set to 107 milliseconds. It's on poly mode with 8 voices of unison. The dry wet is at 47%, 45%. So this is what it sounds like without the spectral resonator. And this is what it sounds like with the spectral resonator. It just basically makes it sound a little bit more metallic. This last little section here, it's basically the same as what we just had, except we take out the wub pad things and then just have this textured sign pad that we brought in at the beginning. That comes back, and we have a vocal that is being vocoded from the same patch but without the wubs. So it's the same patch that we just went over here. I just duplicated that and then turned off the LFO and switched one of the oscillators over to a regular saw wave. They've got 5 voices of unison on each one to kind of create more of a super saw sound instead of the lead. And the sustain is turned all the way up, a little bit of release. The filter is cutting off everything above 4K, basically. No effects in Serum. We've got the delay for post-processing. We've got ROM again here. The mix is at 31%. Low cut is at 5.3, but we're going to cut the lows with this EQ anyways. Then we've got the decay turned down to 1.5. The EQ is cutting out everything below 228 hertz. This is what the saw sounds like that we're going to use to modulate our vocode. Is getting routed into the vocoder on this vocal. So here we've got the vocoder. It's on external mode, and the audio is coming from channel 7, which we just went over. It's up 12 on the format. It's set to retro. I increased the range up to 18K, so basically it's going all the way up to the highest it can. It's got 24 bands. I believe originally it was at 20, and I turned up this low cut, so it's not getting anything below like 200 hertz. We also have a saturator turned on here. Before the EQ or before the vocoder, we have a saturator. It's on regular analog clip mode, just turned up 1.2 or 1.12 dB. It's got the soft clip turned on, glue compressor to kind of pull down some of the peaks in the vocal. All these are all stock. It's just pulling down on the threshold to -10 and then increasing the makeup gain to 2.86. Got the soft clip turned on. We've got this EQ It says that we're automating this, but it's not actually automating anything. It's just set to 426 hertz. After the vocoder, we have one more EQ to make sure that we don't have any low cut or lows coming through, kind of dipping down in this mid-range, high mid-range. Last but not least, on this vocal, we have a tape stop effect from Kilohertz. I'm just automating the play on and off right here, and it's basically just censoring a word because, you know, didn't need to have that in the vocal. And then it just plays out. I'll play the outro.
Yeah.
Sorry, CPU's going crazy. All right. I believe that's it. I went through all the sounds that I used in this track. Tried to use as many techniques as possible that Of the Trees has used in his stuff before. I know there's a ton more information that I can use in future tutorials that I didn't get to use in this one, but I feel like I got as much as possible with what we have here. I'm hoping to make some more tutorials in the future. I know it's been like 1.5 years or 2 years since I made that Charles I and Super Task one. I have some possibilities for like Ellis Dream, more Charles I type stuff, maybe some Clozee, maybe some Chimera. I hope you guys are having a good one. I hope you were able to learn something from this, and take care. I'll see you in the next one. Peace.
Yeah.